I returned from war on a Wednesday, and that same night, my widowed neighbor whispered 5 words that changed everything. Don't expect much sleep tonight. But she wasn't saying what you think she was saying. And when I understood what she actually meant, I broke down for the first time since I came home. My name is Ethan Cole, 8 years in the United States Army, 3 deployments. I returned carrying the kind of weight that doesn't show on the outside, but crushes you from within. I moved into a house I'd inherited on a quiet street in a small town where nothing ever happened. But something had happened next door. My neighbor, Grace Holloway, was a widow. Her husband, a soldier like me, never made it back the way I did. She was 30 years old, raising a 3-year-old daughter alone, and carrying a grief she never let anyone see. But here's what I didn't know yet. Grace had been listening to me scream through the walls at 3 a.m. every single night since I arrived. She heard every nightmare I thought no one knew about, and she never said a word, until the night she whispered those words on my porch with tears in her eyes and a truth I wasn't ready to hear. But why would a widowed neighbor who lost her husband to the same war I returned from let herself get close to another soldier? What did she mean when she whispered, "Don't expect much sleep tonight"? And what was she hiding behind that kitchen light I kept seeing at 3 a.m. that nearly destroyed us both before we even had a chance? The house on Beckett Street in Cedar Falls, North Carolina, belonged to my Uncle Ray. Population 7,200, 1 traffic light, and the kind of town where everyone's lawn told a story, and a new face on the block was the most interesting thing to happen in a month. Ray left me the place when he passed. We'd met exactly 4 times in my whole life. I still don't know why he chose me. Maybe he figured a man returning from war needed somewhere to land. Maybe he just didn't have anyone else. The inside smelled like pipe tobacco and old newsprint. The kitchen faucet dripped in a slow, steady rhythm that sounded like a clock counting down to nothing. 1 recliner, 1 lamp. Stacks of magazines lining the hallway like walls built by a man who had given up on company. But there was a roof over my head and a door I could lock from the inside. For a man who'd spent 3 years sleeping in places where neither of those things was guaranteed, that was enough. I dropped my bag in the bedroom. The springs groaned underneath me when I sat down. I put my hands on my knees and just breathed. Not the tactical breathing they teach you for combat stress. Just breathing, in and out, the sound of my own lungs in a quiet room. I had forgotten what that was like. By late afternoon, I stood on the front porch with gas station coffee in my hands, looking out at Beckett Street for the first time, with nowhere else I needed to be. That's when I saw the little girl. She was standing in the yard next door, right at the edge where my uncle's property met the fence line. Couldn't have been more than 3 years old. Blonde hair that looked like it had been in a ponytail about an hour ago, but had since staged a full rebellion. She was holding a stuffed rabbit by one ear and staring at me with the kind of unblinking focus that only very young children and trained snipers are capable of. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I said. She held up the rabbit. "This is Captain." "Good name." She considered that for a moment. Then she turned around and walked back toward her house like the conversation was over and she had places to be. The front door next door opened and a woman stepped out. She spotted the girl crossing the yard and her whole posture shifted. The quick recalculation of a parent who's realized their child has wandered again. She scooped the girl up and looked over at me. For a moment, we just stood there across 2 yards looking at each other. She was maybe 30. Brown hair pulled into a loose knot. Gray t-shirt and jeans. No makeup. The kind of face that didn't need it because everything worth seeing was already right there on the surface. But underneath that calm exterior, there was a tiredness I recognized. Not the kind you fix with sleep. The kind that settles into your bones when you've been carrying something heavy for so long, your body forgets what it feels like to stand up straight. "Sorry about that," she called over. "She escapes, constantly." "No trouble." She introduced me to Captain. She smiled. Not wide, not performed. Just a small, real thing that moved across her face and was gone. "That rabbit goes everywhere. I'm Grace. Grace Holloway. Ethan Cole. You're Ray's nephew?" "Apparently. He mentioned you a few times. Said you were overseas." "I was. Got back yesterday." She shifted the girl on her hip. And the little girl was playing with her mother's hair now, completely uninterested in the adult conversation. But Grace's eyes changed when she said the next part. Something flickered behind them. something careful. Well, welcome to Beckett Street. If you need anything, we're right here. She went inside. The girl waved at me over her mother's shoulder. I waved back. But something about the way Grace had said overseas stayed with me. She hadn't said it the way civilians say it, with curiosity or polite distance. She said it the way someone says a word they've heard too many times in too many painful conversations. Like the word itself had weight she was tired of lifting. I didn't know her story yet, but I knew that pause. I knew what lived inside it. The first week was all labor. I cleared the house room by room, 9 trash bags, to scrub the kitchen until my hands were raw, fixed the faucet with a 63-cent washer from the hardware store on Main Street, pulled weeds, mowed the yard with a push mower that took 30 minutes of begging before it would start. The work helped. My body knew what to do with physical tasks. It was the still hours that got complicated. I didn't sleep well. I hadn't slept well in years. The problem wasn't noise. The problem was the absence of it. In the field, silence meant something. It meant danger. My nervous system hadn't gotten the memo that silence in Cedar Falls just meant it was nighttime and nothing was happening. I'd lie in bed running scenarios that didn't apply anymore, checking exits I'd already memorized, listening for footsteps that weren't coming. By 2 or 3 in the morning, I'd give up and go sit on the porch in the dark, drinking coffee, watching the street until the sky turned gray. But one night I noticed something. Grace's kitchen light was on at 2:45 a.m. I saw her pass by the window carrying Lily on her hip, pacing slowly, the way you do when a child won't settle. I watched without meaning to. The next night, 3:12 a.m., same light, same window. And the night after that. I realized we were both awake in the dark at the same hours, separated by 30 feet of yard and a fence neither of us had built. There was something about that. Knowing someone else was up, someone else was carrying their own weight through the quiet hours. It made 3 a.m. feel slightly less like enemy territory. But what I didn't know, what I wouldn't learn until much later, was that Grace wasn't just up because of Lily. She was up because she could hear me. Every nightmare, every shout that ripped out of me at 3 a.m. that I didn't even know I was making. She heard all of it through those thin walls, and she never knocked. She never said a single word. She just turned on her kitchen light so I wouldn't be the only one awake in the dark. I just didn't know it yet. On the 9th day, Lily wandered into my yard again. I was pulling up rotted porch boards when I heard the small footsteps behind me. She stood 4 feet away, Captain hanging from one hand, watching me with serious eyes. "What are you doing?" "Fixing the porch." "Why?" "Because it's broken." She considered that. "My mom fixes things too." "Yeah? What does she fix?" "People," she said. Before I could respond, Grace appeared at the fence. "Lily Marie Holloway. What did I say about staying in the yard?" Lily looked at her mother, then at me, then back. "He's fixing the porch," she reported, as if that justified everything. Grace leaned on the fence, tiredness around her eyes that I recognized from my own mirror. "She likes you. She doesn't usually talk to new people. She's got good instincts. I'm extremely trustworthy. I also know absolutely nothing about children." She almost laughed. It didn't quite make it out, but the near miss made me want to try again. "You need help with that porch?" she asked. "I'm managing." Managing and doing it right are two different things. She came around the fence, took one look at the boards I'd pulled, and told me I was removing the wrong ones. She was right. She knew which were rotted versus just weathered by sound alone. A firm knock versus a dull thud that meant the wood had given up from the inside. Her father had been a contractor. She could read a level, swing a hammer without wasting motion, and spot water damage from 3 feet away by the way the grain had shifted. We worked side by side for 3 hours. Lily sat on the grass nearby, deep in conversation with Captain about something involving a birthday party and a dragon. Grace and I barely talked while we worked, but the silence wasn't empty. It was the kind of quiet that happens between two people who don't need words to feel comfortable in the same space. I hadn't felt that since my unit. She came back the next day, and the day after that. Lily always came too, always with Captain, always with observations that landed somewhere between hilarious and heartbreaking. She told me the sky was sad when it rained. She told me Captain had bad dreams sometimes, but she held him until he felt better. She told me her daddy lived in the sky now and could see everything, even when she ate cookies before dinner. I looked at Grace when Lily said that. Grace's hands didn't stop moving. She kept sanding the board she was working on, jaw tight, eyes fixed. But I saw her swallow hard. I saw her fingers pressed down just a little harder than they needed to. I didn't ask. Not that day. But what I noticed over those first weeks was this. Grace never once looked at me the way everyone else in Cedar Falls did. No, thank you for your service face. No, I wonder what's wrong with him face. She treated me like a guy with a bad porch who could use an extra pair of hands. No performance, no tiptoeing. She just showed up and got to work, and that was the thing that cracked me open without me realizing it. One evening after Lily had fallen asleep on my couch with Captain tucked under her chin, Grace and I sat on the porch with coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The street was dark. The cicadas were loud. Lily's father, I said. Was he military? Grace looked out at the street for a long time. Marcus, she said. Sergeant first class. 2 tours in Afghanistan. He came home, but he didn't really come home. Whatever was behind his eyes when he left didn't come back with him. She set her mug down. Her hand was steady, but I could see the effort it took. He started pulling away 4 months after he got back. Stopped sleeping. Stopped talking. Sat in the garage for hours. I'd check on him and he'd say he was fine. Always fine. The most dangerous word in the English language. She paused. I begged him to talk to someone. He said soldiers don't do that. I told him to help me understand. He said he couldn't. And then one morning I woke up and he wasn't in bed. He wasn't in the house. He was in the garage. She didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. Grace, I said, I'm sorry. She shook her head. Don't say that. Everyone says that. Then they look at me like I'm made of glass. I'm not glass. I'm tired. There's a difference. Okay. Then I won't say sorry. I'll say this. You're the least fragile person I've met in this town, and your daughter thinks you fix people. I'd say she's right. Something shifted in her face. Not a smile. Something quieter. Like recognition. Like I'd said the one thing she'd been waiting a long time to hear. You know what the worst part is? She said. It's not the grief. Grief I can carry. The worst part is that people stopped seeing me as a person. I became a tragedy. Grace, the war widow. But I'm not a tragedy. I'm a mother. I'm a therapist. I can retile a bathroom and make the best chili in this county and stay up until 3 a.m. with a child who won't sleep and still show up the next morning. But nobody sees that. They just see the thing that happened to me. I see it, I said. She looked at me. Yeah, I think you might actually be the first person who does. We sat in the dark on a porch we'd rebuilt together. 2 people carrying different versions of the same weight, realizing for the first time they didn't have to carry it alone. But I hadn't told her my story yet. And my story was the one thing that could destroy whatever was growing between us. Because 8 months before Grace Holloway came home from war and disappeared into his silence, I was in a command room 6,000 miles away. I made a call that sent 3 men into a building that wasn't clear. 2 came out. 1 didn't. Corporal Danny Vega. He was 24. He had a photo of his mother taped inside his helmet and told me once that the thing he missed most about home was the sound of rain on a tin roof. I gave the order. Danny went in. Danny didn't come back. I carried that across 3 countries and 2 oceans and into the bedroom of a dead man's house on Beckett Street, where I screamed Danny's name at 3 a.m. without knowing I was doing it. And the woman next to me on this porch had no idea that I knew exactly what Marcus felt. Not because I studied it, because I was living it. The only difference between me and Grace Holloway was that I was still here, and I wasn't sure I deserved to be. But I didn't tell Grace any of that. Not yet. Because I was terrified that when she learned the truth about the kind of man I really was, she wouldn't just stop seeing me as a person, she'd stop seeing me at all. And inside that house, Lily slept on my couch holding Captain tight, dreaming about a daddy in the sky, while I sat next to her mother, holding a secret that could shatter us both, wondering how long I could carry one more thing before something inside me finally broke. 2 weeks passed before the truth came out, and it didn't come out gently. Grace and I were replacing cabinet doors when Lily toddled in, holding a folded photograph she'd found in my duffel bag. She held it up to Grace with both hands. "Mommy, who's that?" Grace took it. I turned around and my blood went cold. A unit photo. 12 men in full gear squinting against desert sun. I was in the back row, and in the front row, second from the left, smiling wide, was Corporal Danny Vega. Grace studied the photo. Then she looked at me. You never told me about your unit. You never asked. I'm asking now. I could have deflected, but Grace had opened the most painful door of her life and let me look inside without flinching. I owed her the same, so I told her. The command room, the building that wasn't clear, the call I made. A Danny going in, Danny not coming out. The sound of the radio going silent and knowing in my gut before anyone confirmed it that I had sent a 24-year-old kid who missed the sound of rain on a tin roof into a place he'd never walk out of. I told her the nightmares she'd been hearing through the walls weren't random. They were Danny, every single night. I told her I understood exactly what Marcus felt because I was drowning in the same water. The only difference was that I was still breathing, and I didn't know why I got to keep going when Danny didn't and Marcus didn't. Grace was quiet for a long time. The whole house was holding its breath. You think you don't deserve to be here, she said finally, not a question. Some days, Ethan, I watched the man I loved disappear into himself because he believed exactly what you believe right now. That he was damaged, that he was dangerous, that carrying it alone was strength. It wasn't strength. It was the thing that killed him. Her eyes were wet. Her voice was iron. I will not watch that happen twice. Not on this street, not to you. She handed the photograph back. Danny Vega died because of a war, not because of you. And the fact that you carry him every single night tells me exactly the kind of man you are. It doesn't scare me. It makes me more sure. Something broke open in my chest, not painfully, like a door locked for years finally swinging free. I sat at the kitchen table and put my head in my hands, and for the first time since Danny walked into that building, I cried. The real kind. The kind that comes from somewhere so deep you didn't know it existed until it's pouring out of you. Grace pulled a chair next to mine. She didn't touch me. She didn't speak. She just sat there, present, steady, refusing to leave. Then Lily appeared in the doorway holding Captain. Are you sad? She asked. A little. She climbed onto my lap without permission, put Captain on the table facing me, and said, Captain helps when you're sad. You can hold him. I looked at Grace over her daughter's head, tears on her face, but she was smiling. And in that kitchen that smelled like sawdust and old coffee, with a 3-year-old on my lap and a stuffed rabbit staring at me from the table, I understood something I'd been too afraid to believe. I was home, not because of the house, because of them. But the peace didn't last. 3 days later, a silver sedan parked in front of Grace's house. A woman in her 60s stepped out. Gray hair, expensive coat, a face that had been clenched for 2 years. Grace saw her through the window, and her whole body went rigid. Joan, she said, Marcus's mother. Joan didn't waste time. She told Grace that Marcus hadn't been gone 2 years. She said Lily needed stability, not another broken soldier. She said Grace was selfish. Then she said Marcus would be ashamed. That last one hit like a grenade. I walked out of the kitchen, not for confrontation, because Grace's hands were shaking and she was pretending they weren't. Mrs. Holloway, I said, I served with men like your son, and I can tell you with certainty that a man like Marcus would want one thing above everything, for his daughter to be loved and for his wife to stop being punished for surviving. Something cracked behind her eyes. Not agreement, not yet, but the first fracture in a wall she'd been building since her son died. She left without another word. 2 weeks later, Joan came back. Different this time. She brought a box of Marcus's childhood things. Baseball cards, school photos, a wooden airplane he'd carved in shop class. She wanted Lily to have them. She held Lily on her lap and didn't say a word about me. On her way out, she stopped and looked at me across the yard. He would have liked you, she said quietly. Marcus always respected men who told the truth, even when it cost them. I stood there feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Forgiven, not by Joan, by myself. The weeks after that moved the way water moves when it finds the right path. Grace started leaving her coffee mug at my house. I started reading Lily bedtime stories without being asked. One evening I noticed Marcus's framed photograph on Grace's mantle had been tilted by Lily's small hands. I straightened it without thinking. Grace saw me do it. She didn't say anything. But that night, she held my hand for the first time. She didn't ask me to replace Marcus. She asked me to stand beside her while she carried him. I asked her the same with Danny. That was the deal. Not perfection, just presence. Love after loss doesn't mean forgetting. It means building something new without pretending the old thing never existed. A month later, a construction firm called. Senior project manager 2 hours north. Real money. The old version of me would have said yes before they finished the sentence. I told Grace that night on the porch. "Is that what you want?" she asked. I looked at the porch we'd rebuilt together. The yard, the fence, the kitchen window where her light was the first thing I saw at 3 a.m. when I thought I was alone in the world. "No, I want to be here." "Then why are you thinking about it?" I told her the messy truth. That part of me still heard the old voice saying that choosing something small and quiet meant giving up. Grace set down her coffee. "Ethan, who told you that a life you actually love is a small life?" I called the firm the next morning and turned it down. Applied for facilities manager at the county medical center instead. In the interview, Dr. Okafor asked why I wanted the job. "I'm done chasing impressive," I said. "I want to build something that lasts and come home at a reasonable hour to the people who matter." She offered me the job before I reached the parking lot. It wasn't glamorous, but when I drove home every evening to a street where the porch light was on and a little girl was watching from my truck from the window, it felt like the exact life I was supposed to be living. Then came the night. A Thursday in October, cool enough to smell like wood smoke and fallen leaves. Lily asleep, Grace and I on our porch. I'd been carrying the ring for 6 weeks. "Grace," I said. She turned. I opened the box. The diamond caught the porch light and threw a thin brightness across the steps between us. The bravest thing I did since coming home wasn't fixing this house or facing what happened with Danny. It was letting you and Lily in. You didn't save me. You just refused to let me disappear. I want to spend the rest of my life being the man who refuses to let you disappear either." She stared at the ring, then at me. "You're proposing on the porch steps. On a Thursday. Felt right." She laughed, broken and tangled with tears. Held out her hand. Steady, certain. "Yes, obviously yes." We sat there for a long time after. Then she lifted her head and looked at me with that expression that meant something real was coming. "Those first weeks after you moved in, I heard everything through the walls. Every nightmare. Every scream at 3 a.m. I didn't know your name yet, but I knew that sound because I'd heard it before." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "So I started turning on my kitchen light. Every night. Not for Lily, for you. So if you looked out your window, you'd see it. You'd know you weren't alone in the dark." My throat closed. She leaned her forehead against mine and whispered the 5 words that started this whole story. "Don't expect much sleep tonight." She paused. "Because I'm never turning that light off. And you are never going to be alone at 3 a.m. again." Not what you thought. Not what anyone who clicked on this story expected. She was saying, "I see your darkness. I've lived next to it. I've lost someone to it. And I refuse to look away." We got married 4 months later. A backyard ceremony. String lights Grace measured at precise intervals because close enough is not the same as right. Lily carried Captain down the aisle instead of flowers, and nobody questioned it. Joan Holloway sat in the front row, cried the entire ceremony, and afterward walked up to me, straightened my tie and said, "Take care of my girls." My girls. She said my girls. On the mantel in our living room, Marcus's folded flag sits in its triangle case. Next to it, a small frame photograph of Danny Vega, smiling in the desert sun, 24 years old forever. 2 men who didn't make it home, and 2 people who carry them every day. Not as ghosts, but as reasons to keep the light on for someone else. I was home. If this story touched something real inside you, do one thing for me right now. Subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell. Stories like this, about real people carrying real weight and choosing love anyway, don't get told enough. Every time you subscribe, you're telling us to keep telling them. Now answer me this honestly in the comments. Take a moment before you type. Who in your life has been quietly turning on the light at 3 a.m. for you? And have you ever stopped long enough to notice?